Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Mishal Saeed, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and really the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to have Alison Mullins, the founder and CEO of Rep Methods LLC, joining us. Alison brings a decade of expertise in sales and marketing to really drive growth for different industries. And she's known for a very results-driven approach in leadership and leadership in Women in Stone, transforming how businesses connect with key decision makers. We'll explore her inspiring journey, how Rep Methods is reshaping industry growth, and her vision for scaling this dynamic firm. So let's dive in. Alison, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's an honor to be here. And it's about 25 years in sales. I don't know, way more than a decade, thank God.
So 2 decades, but honestly, I'm so excited to dive in. Absolute pleasure having you on. Let's kick things off. So take us back to the beginning, 25 years of expertise and experience. What specific problem, perhaps around ineffective sales processes or limited market reach, inspired you to actually start Rep Methods?
Yeah, that journey didn't start but just a few years ago. So I'm happy to divulge. I certainly didn't have a clear, straight path coming out of school or even in my childhood. So let's be real. I didn't know I was going to end in sales for life, but I was very, very blessed and gifted in that field. But a few years ago, I transitioned from being more of like a marketing style of salesperson. I did a lot of sales marketing for an international company for many years and then transitioned into just back into a commission-based sales role. And during that time period, I actually entered a phase of transition in my confidence between the time from being a non-commission salesperson and becoming back into commission sales. I didn't even realize how great these methods had developed on my own. And I also began managing staff, doing others. I was asked on a regular basis to create impactful mentorship elements for not only employees that were in the same firm that I was working with, but in some of my clients' firms as well. I was constantly being asked to train their salespeople, teach them what I do. I'm so good at my job. And that can really get into your ego and make you feel like you're super awesome, extraordinarily gifted person. I'm not extraordinarily gifted, but I definitely had some methods. But it did challenge me as I saw we went through a lot during COVID with transitions in logistics on construction materials. It was a very stressful and challenging time. And as I approached my mid 40s, it was also a time when I began to reflect on giving back and how could I actually help the future generation, the pool of salespeople in trade, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that trade might look like, because there's a lot of trades in construction, but any trade industry, our pool of sales professionals is very limited, very the same people revolving into other positions. And it just never seems like we had gained traction and a lot of new growth. And that began the challenge of writing my first book, getting it all on paper, drafting it out, figuring out how I could create coursework and video programming, following along with the tech of 2023 at the time. It's moving very fast, isn't it? But I started with getting some coursework outlined and drafting that process, and then began writing my first book. That book became a bestseller. I began entering into the speaking field, public speaking arena, and before long realized that the impact is strong. So it's very cool.
Phenomenal. I love the fact that really going back from the beginning, you focused a lot on your own personal journey, influencing sort of the way in which your professional endeavors shape that direction. Now, I want to learn a little bit about, really the core offer today. What is really that business model for you? Because there's sales representation, there's marketing campaigns, you do a lot of that business development consulting as well. How do you structure what you do for your clients, and primarily what is the core service that you have?
Yeah, I built Rep Methods to be a long-term build, long game. I think that anybody who's getting into entrepreneurship has to have a frame of reference. If you've got investors behind you and you're ready for a quick growth segment, good for you. For me, it was all self-investment, money that I had from savings. I did not have investor companies behind this. I knew I had to grow slowly, and I also had to supplement my revenue in that process, because it's not like you become a millionaire overnight or anything like that. And I'm certainly still not there today. But for me, I started out wanting to do boot camps and seminars and the opportunity to actually train salespeople as almost like a contract agent, a consultancy firm, essentially, where I could partner with a firm for 1, 2, 3, 6 months, depending on what that looked like, and actually go in as an ad hoc potential sub-sales manager and work with their teams directly. Very quickly, I learned I had to pivot a little bit off of that business model, because the forward ask in that type of a long-term contract, it's quite an investment for small businesses. And I knew I had to have a revenue stream structure that was in line with the smaller mom and pop businesses that I was going to be servicing, that I was planning to help. And I also knew I had to stay in that lane initially, and that as I grew as a business, I would eventually be able to branch out into other businesses outside of perhaps construction materials and building materials. And I could, pivot into the tech industry, perhaps, or other segments within the business enterprise world as it is. And with learning the buy-in and having a price structure that could cater to the smaller and larger businesses was very much the first pivot. And then a big second pivot for me was I actually had a business coach myself during that process. I invested in someone who could walk with me, help me see what's happening, analyze results, and knowing that I have to be able to pivot very quickly from the original business plan. And I added the coaching segment, which took off right away. It was that price value add that was an easy yes for all of my clients to be able to say, I can afford this, I can do this now. And it was up to me to create a structure for smaller businesses. We're talking about under 10, 15 million revenue on an annual net, and gross revenue anywhere, I would say, under 30 million. These types of companies needed the consultancy advocacy, and they're the ones who can actually invest in short-term boot camps and also workshops where I can actually just go in for 1 or 2 days, do some talking, and then do some long-term prospect work with each of their employees. And I will say that the addition of the coaching segment, which landed, I think I was about 1 full registration year in business, but I had not been public for maybe about 8 months when the addition of that segment came in. And then all of a sudden, the structure changed where it became, for me, the perfect customer. I was able to identify that perfect target persona, and identify that I would go in, do a workshop. We would, again, identify core employees that would be on a long-term scalable coaching method. And then there's repeat visits and work that goes with that long-term client. So one client becomes a 7-figure client for me in the long game. That makes sense.
I love that. Now, from what it sounds like, really having the bootcamp seminar style format of delivering a lot of that consulting, a lot of the coaching that you do on the sales side, especially on the employee level, right? So what does the customer journey typically look, with rep methods, like from onboarding, delivery? What is success defined as for an organization that you do work with?
Yeah, sure. So success for me is defined, and I want a long-term investment client that I can work with for 1 to 2 years. And I would say that each individual person it varies. That person's journey is going to be around 6 months to a year, and then possibly returning again in 18 to 24 months just for some refresh work, etc. But the customer journey is, I believe that my customers are my customers for life, because the business owner is the primary consumer here. And as that business owner expands and grows themselves with the addition of new employees, onboarding new locations, perhaps a second retail branch or a third retail branch. I love businesses that have multiple brick and mortar establishments because that type of client, they're a client for life. We go in and we can do spot work with any number of employees at any time. But if you're talking about your average $15 million revenue company, it's typically going to be about a year until they may or may not onboard or expand.
Got it. I'm curious about, it's a topic that comes up all the time on the podcast, is scalability, right? Especially with the fulfillment model with coaching, where it's very customized depending on who you're kind of working with, the retail store, the organization, industry, right? Even though you've niched down. What are some of the ways you're thinking about offer productization with your fulfillment model to where you can increase your capacity and even made and streamline a lot of the fulfillment side? Like, what's the next step for you as you're looking at scaling?
Yes. Because this isn't my only business, I have also ACCM, which is a business development company. But for me, this is also a philanthropic environment type of company. I am not a non-for-profit. This time, scalability for me is actually being able to develop internship programs, workforce development within city communities. I'm doing that right now as we speak in my home city, Richmond, Virginia, and then being able to create a repeatable model that again is not for profit, but is something that I can actually cookie cutter, copycat into major cities across the United States.
Love that. And is this for, just to clarify, the business development company or for Rep Methods?
That's Rep Methods. Yeah, this is completely for Rep Methods. It's all about sales training, workforce development. Because I'm in the construction industry and I'm a woman, so I'm a minority business owner, but I also happen to be a minority female in a major male dominated industry. We have groups that are fantastic and organizations that have been around for 50 years. One of them, for example, is National Association of Women in Construction. Part of that idea came from my participation in a camp that we have done for young girls, teaching them about the construction trades. And working with a local continuing education director here in my home city, we also discussed what that looks like in the services industry and in fabrication. I'm a part of a bunch of national organizations in the stone industry, and we need to develop our workforce from the ground up. So there has to be a way to provide opportunities for kids that can't afford to go to college. We have to groom our own new sales workforce. People don't necessarily just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be in sales. Yeah. So being able to provide in that sort of original boot camp style, a method of training and giving kids a path forward in our industry without having a 4-year degree.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so important, especially with education, right? There's like the orthodox path. It's like, oh, we preach, you have to go down that road. You have to go to get your degree. But like sales being like one of the most invaluable skills out there, like just that emphasis needs to be a little bit more on the forefront. So I love the fact that you mentioned that. And that's part of a lot of what you're doing on a purpose-driven level.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of like your growth, walk us through how you're currently acquiring some of your clients right now. What are the strategies, whether it's like paid advertising, LinkedIn, social media, organic, word of mouth, referrals, like what's been the best for generating leads through the door for services?
Yeah, generating leads for me has come mostly from my speaking engagements and national conference segments and forward-facing in-person events. It is part of my original business plan. I never intended on having huge marketing budgets or huge tech advertising. I want, and I will probably remain for a very long time on a word of mouth and boots on the ground type of growth marketing plan. And there's a reason for that. I want to always be known as the type of salesperson who is honest, transparent, relatable, reliable. And I think word of mouth and referral based business is the best compliment that you could ever achieve in owning your own business. And I knew that without online ads and paid, but I know that I want to reach my audience by being in front of my audience. It's the same things that I teach my clients. It's about in-person selling. And I believe that if I can be forward facing in front of an audience, I'm going to gain exactly the leads that I need.
Yeah, 100%. I feel, and I actually want to get your thought process on this because we've had other guests on the show, referrals being like the most powerful way to generate leads. They're the most high intent out there, but not oftentimes the most predictable or consistent way to guarantee a certain number of sales calls or leads coming in each month. What are some of the ways that you're thinking about even like building predictability as you're approaching scaling? What's your thought process there? Would love to hear your thoughts on what the next step looks like for you in terms of scaling, even outside of referrals and word of mouth. What else you're exploring?
Yeah. So in my second book, I wrote a book about for entrepreneurs called Beyond Order Makers. And I believe in a process that I wrote about called manifestation selling, which is essentially human-centric methods that you can use on a daily basis to keep your pipeline flowing, right? And if we can practice these elements of maintaining a specific number of phone calls, emails, outreaches, follow-ups, and general staying in front of your customer, speaking events per year, if I can quantify those elements by meeting those goals on a daily, weekly, and monthly task, I'm going to always have business coming in and flowing on a regular basis. For me, it's about that long-term consistency and being able to keep myself in front of my audience, but in a more personal way.
I would love for you to share with us today kind of the strategies and mechanisms you're exploring to quantify that approach so that there is like that consistency and that you have like that systematized and dialed in on the acquisition side. How kind of navigating and exploring that?
Yeah. So one of my methods is called the magic number method. And I use this with my sales clients on a regular basis. So your listeners will get a little bit of a freebie of chapter 13 in that book. But essentially, if you have your core gross revenue that you're trying to hit on an annual basis, whatever that is, we can call it a round number like $100,000, right?
Yeah.
You want your gross revenue to be $100,000, then you have to do a little math and do some equation work on what your offer is and quantify that and how many of those you're going to need to sell in order to hit that gross revenue sales dollars. So for instance, one of my workshops in person is $5,000. So if we're just scaling it based on workshops and I want to hit $100,000 in a year, I need to perform and provide 25 workshops throughout the year in order for me to hit that goal number of $100,000 in gross revenue for that workshop. Based on that, this is a little bit more woo versus scientific, but I start to drill down what are the simple tasks that I need to do to get myself 25 workshops booked throughout the year. So that means that I need on a weekly basis, I use the multiplier 5. We'll use that for an example. And I can start to apply that in all of the tasks that I do on the regular for typical sales. So on a weekly basis, I need to be looking for, outreaching, and talking to 5 new customers. I need to be writing 5 proposals at minimum a month if I expect to be getting the return on that within the following month. Identifying for me is a checklist item, right? These are tasks that I can do, which my brain works that way. I love being able to write things down on a list and check off the box that it's complete for the day. And at that point, I don't have to be staring at my spreadsheet models on whether or not I'm going to be getting the new leads or the new revenue. I know that they are going to be coming into play.
Got it. Now, I'd love to learn a bit about your growth's been incredible thus far. You have a good runway, good systemization, thinking a lot about some of the ways in which, you're going to approach scale. If there was like a bottleneck that stood out for you, what would it be? Is it attracting the right types of industries, types of clients to work with, improving conversions, maybe refining the sales process? Like, what are you most focused on solving to keep all of your momentum going? If you can share with the listeners today.
Sure. My bottleneck list is time management, which I talk about, I teach on a regular basis, but I'm human and I have the same issues just like any other business owner. We
Mm.
have a lot of things that we have to accomplish during the week. I've set hours in my calendar for bookkeeping and invoicing and keeping the books clean and everything else. But when you're your own boss, when you're a small business owner, you're doing everything. You've got
Yeah,
to have hours for the marketing. You've got to have hours for the client meetings.
yeah.
And I happen to have another business. So, for instance, I just finished a website development for a small company in Virginia and building that out for the client. And that took a total of 35 working hours spread out over the course of 2 months. So, for me, my bottleneck is always about making sure that I'm saving time, putting in time,
Mm.
allotting time for the outreach,
Mm.
because I will say to anybody who's struggling with getting sales in the door, if you're not picking up the phone and doing that person to person outreach,
Mm.
you're not getting any sales.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I know you have a more of a tech background, Michelle. In my line of work, I'm not anti AI by any means, but I am probably starting to become one of those disgruntled
Mm.
humans towards a lot of the bot sales techniques that exist.
Yeah, yeah.
And what that, I know you didn't bring this up, but like what that means for me is that I use AI every day
Mm.
in the human-centric task needs that help me get all of the jobs done
Yeah,
all of the time.
yeah.
However, I also believe that my generation style of sales is
Mm.
going to be needed
Mm.
more than ever
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like that's where that full circle moment comes into play, but at least you're thinking about how can we use AI to streamline a lot of what's happening there, especially as a founder, you're wearing all the hats, juggling things as you go.
Yes.
I'm curious to learn a little bit about, have you thought about more specifically putting in place finding marketing automation, systemization in place, both on the sales and the marketing side? That way you can
It is,
focus on
yes.
SEO.
And
Yeah.
I do. I have a huge automation build out that helps me with my own marketing. If you've seen any of the marketing that I do on social, most of my marketing generation time is
Yeah.
1 day a month. And I
Yeah.
spend a very few short hours
Mm.
implementing tactics and strategies that I can spit out very quickly using a lot of the AI assistance that's available and
Yeah.
planning programs so that I don't have to look at it. I have to look at my marketing 1 day a month. And that
Yeah.
is such a blessing. Technology for me is a gift. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One last question as we're in the lightning round. Top priorities over the next 6 to 12 months as you're looking at growth, scale, any revenue targets, performance milestones you're looking to hit. Would love for you to share with us today what that looks like.
One of the biggest milestones that I've hit thus far was just being out of debt and actually in the black. So when you are a young business, so Rep Methods literally launched in 2023. So I'm just over that 2 year mark. And for me, having all of that investment being repaid and then heading towards the full revenue years, and I've made it through that rough section of starting a new business. At this point, I know that my long-term goals are just slow growth. I'm
Yeah.
not going anywhere. I'm not changing anything. And then one of my other major goals is I didn't get to write a book this summer because I had some surgery, but I'm not done writing either. So I do expect to have some more publications to be balancing along this journey as well.
Love that. Love that. On that note, that wraps up an inspiring episode of Founders Future. Alison, thank you so much for joining us today. Absolute honor and pleasure having you on, sharing your journey on how you're growing and expanding Rep Method into other states. We're going to follow that journey along going into 2025 and hopefully have you on for a part two if that's the case. So looking forward to really everything you're doing and the success that you're going to bring. To our listeners, if you would like to get in touch with Alison, we will link her LinkedIn profile in the summary below and her website. And you can find some more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses scale through world-class sales and marketing systems. And don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future, of course, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Until then, everyone, keep climbing, and we'll see you all on the next one. Alison, thank you so much once again for joining us.